In August 2021, a verdict handed down by the Fukuoka District Court shocked all of Japan. Satoru Nomura, the leader of the Yakuza group, Kudo-kai, was sentenced to death. Nicknamed the Living King of Hell, Nomura showed no remorse in court. Even when facing the death penalty, he stared directly at the judge and shouted, "You will regret this for the rest of your life." Nomura's life was defined by extremes, both absurd and brutal. In June 2014, Japanese media reported a shocking incident. A nurse working at a cosmetic surgery clinic was attacked on her way home. She was stabbed dozens of times in the neck, head, and body. The attack was exceptionally vicious. After an investigation, police concluded that the attack was carried out by the Yakuza group Kudo-kai. Once the news broke, the public reaction was explosive. Kudo-kai is the largest Yakuza organization in Kyushu. Its influence is not limited to Fukuoka or Kyushu. It has even expanded into Tokyo. Under the leadership of its fourth-generation boss, Satoru Nomura, Kudo-kai grew increasingly powerful. The group frequently formed alliances to oppose the Yamaguchi-gumi. The Yamaguchi-gumi is the oldest and largest Yakuza organization in Japanese history. The fact that Kudo-kai openly challenged it showed just how strong Nomura's group had become. So, the question was obvious. Why would a Yakuza organization of this scale attempt to murder a nurse with no underworld ties? The answer traces back to 2012. At the time, Nomura was 67 years old. He suddenly became dissatisfied with his body, specifically with his masculinity, and decided to undergo a highly sensitive urological procedure. As the leader of Kudo-kai, Nomura did not want his identity or the nature of the surgery to be known. He arranged for a doctor to examine him privately and then went in for the procedure. Before the surgery, the nurses present were unaware of who he really was. One nurse tried to help Nomura relax. She made a casual joke, saying, "With all those tattoos, this shouldn't hurt for you, especially since you're here for this kind of surgery." Nomura misunderstood her words. He believed the nurse was mocking his masculinity. Enraged, Nomura jumped off the operating table and began shouting at her. The nurse and hospital administrators were forced to apologize repeatedly to calm him down. Only after the doctor intervened did Nomura return to the operating table and allow the surgery to continue. However, after the operation, Nomura was still dissatisfied with the result. He also remained deeply resentful of the nurse's comment. He became convinced that her words had affected his mood, leading to poor recovery after discharge. He claimed to experience emotional distress, slow healing, and even allergic infection in the operated area. To Nomura, the entire surgical experience was unacceptable. The more he thought about it, the angrier he became. Eventually, Nomura ordered his subordinates to retaliate against the nurse who had made the joke. So, 6 months after Nomura's surgery, members of Kudo-kai came looking for that unfortunate nurse. As she was walking home after work and passed through a narrow alley, she was suddenly stopped by a man dressed in black. Then the man pulled a knife from behind him and stabbed her repeatedly. The nurse didn't even have time to react. She collapsed into a pool of blood without even the strength to cry for help. But fortunately, someone happened to pass by that alley and called an ambulance for her, and because of that, she survived. After the attack, Nomura even hypocritically went to the hospital to visit the stabbed nurse. He acted as if nothing had happened, and his words were laced with sarcasm and cold mockery. A genital surgery, retaliation against a nurse, and then mocking her to her face. It's genuinely difficult to associate any of this with the image of a Yakuza boss. But Nomura's revenge did not end with the nurse. In his twisted logic, the nurse's disrespect was the result of poor discipline by the hospital, and the unsatisfactory surgical outcome was the hospital's crime as a whole. And so, 1 year after the nurse was attacked, the blade of revenge was turned toward a family member of the hospital director, a dentist. This dentist had not been involved in the surgery at all, but as a core member of the medical family, he became a target for Nomura to vent his personal resentment. On that day, a professional hitman from Kudo-kai lay in wait along the dentist's usual route home from work. Catching him off guard, the attacker suddenly rushed out and stabbed him repeatedly in the head and abdomen. The attack was brutally vicious, clearly intended to kill. Only because passersby noticed in time and rushed him to the hospital did the dentist survive. This is what made Nomura terrifying. In his world, emotion alone could justify killing. Unlike those who join the underworld because they have no way out, Nomura was born into a prominent family in the Kitakyushu region of Japan. He grew up extremely wealthy. His father was a major local landowner and merchant. During Japan's period of economic recovery, the Nomura family used their money to buy a large amount of land, then leased that land to factories and businesses, earning rent without lifting a finger. Nomura also had 6 siblings, and he was the youngest child in the family. The Nomura family spoiled him excessively, and this shaped his arrogant, domineering personality, looking down on everyone. Even when he played with neighborhood children, he often snatched other kids' toys, and he would form cliques to bully children from poorer families. When Nomura reached school age, his father, hoping he would amount to something, used connections and money to send him to an elite school. But Nomura was never the type to study. He often got into fights at school. Nomura liked the feeling of having others follow him and obey him without question. One time, Nomura led a group of classmates out of the school gates to steal, and they were caught by a shop owner and taken to the police station. The incident was reported to the school. With no other choice, the school leadership went to his father and asked that Nomura take a leave from school because, given the power of the Nomura family, the school leaders did not dare to expel him. When Nomura heard this, he did not hesitate and immediately decided to go back home. His family also doted on him and simply allowed him to waste his education. After all, the family had money. After leaving school, Nomura did not sit idle. He gathered a group of bad companions and spent his days eating, drinking, visiting prostitutes, and gambling. Under their influence, Nomura became involved in gambling. He had an exceptional talent for it, and every time he went to a casino, he could win a large amount of money. One night, Nomura went on an unbelievable streak. He won 200 million yen in a single run, setting a record at the casino. This casino was a business controlled by one of Japan's Yakuza groups, and many gang bosses were active there. Nomura's actions caught the attention of Kudo-kai's tactician, Kimura Kiyozumi. There was an odd irony in his name. The 2 kanji in Kiyozumi are often used to describe a gentle, innocent young woman, and yet, this big rough Yakuza boss was actually named that. Seeing Nomura thriving in the casino, Kimura wanted to challenge him head-on. Nomura wasn't afraid and gladly accepted. The result was that Kimura won decisively, and Nomura was left with enormous debt. Unwilling to accept it, Nomura had his family cover the loss, then went back to Kimura and decided to gamble again. Seeing Nomura's fearless personality, Kimura felt he was absolutely good material for the Yakuza, so he used this opportunity to recruit him into the underworld. Nomura didn't hesitate. He already knew how powerful the Yakuza were in Japan. If he could rise to the position of boss, wouldn't that mean thousands of underlings following him? It was exactly the boss dream he had always wanted. In the late 1970s, recommended by Kimura, a key figure in the Tanaka-gumi, Nomura officially stepped into Kudo-kai. Unlike poor kids who lived by the blade, Nomura joined with a fortune. He essentially brought capital into the group. What Kimura valued was not only his nerve, but also the deep financial power of the family behind him. In the strictly hierarchical Tanaka-gumi, Nomura started out as nothing more than a minor boss. To climb quickly, he launched a money plus violence double offensive. Outwardly, he did show extreme ruthlessness. Inwardly, he used cash to smooth every connection and open every door. In 1980, Tanaka Shintaro, the leader of the Tanaka-gumi, was assassinated by rival forces during gang conflict, an event that became the turning point in Nomura's life. Although Nomura was known for cruelty, his most central way of establishing authority was not simply street assassinations, but control through money. In 1988, his mother's death left him an enormous inheritance of up to 700 million yen. Nomura did not squander it. Instead, he poured the entire sum into the organization's operations. He carried out a modernization upgrade of the Tanaka-gumi's casinos, and even transformed his own private residence into a high-end casino, specifically used to entertain political and business elites. Nomura turned the construction industry in Kitakyushu into his personal ATM. He required every construction project to pay a handling fee of 1% to 5%. Otherwise, bulldozers at the worksite could catch fire at any time, and grenades could appear at the project manager's home. After Tanaka's death, Nomura did not immediately take power through a vote. Instead, he used the casino revenue in his hands to buy people over on a massive scale. He distributed casino profits to the underlings, making them realize that following Boss Nomura wasn't just about status, it was about money. Under this kind of financial temptation, rivals were squeezed out and pushed to the margins. Nomura smoothly took over the Tanaka-gumi's authority and officially began his Living King of Hell era in Kitakyushu. At this point, his status within Kudo-kai was second only to the group's chairman, but the position of Gumi leader was not Nomura's final goal. Nomura believed that power had to be taken in one decisive step. So, in order to secure the chairman's seat, he used various means to impose new rules on the businesses controlled by Kudo-kai across Kyushu and Fukuoka. In addition to paying protection money, they also had to hand over a portion of their sales revenue. Beyond that, relying on the real estate connections his family had accumulated, he easily helped the boss at the time secure large parcels of land for investment and construction projects tied to Yakuza business. His capabilities were recognized by many within the organization. As a result, in the second year after being promoted to Gumi leader, Nomura was promoted again, becoming Kudo-kai's fourth-generation chairman. Starting in the 1980s, Nomura's power within Kudo-kai rose step by step. During the 30 years he held power, Kudo-kai completely degenerated into a violent organization with terrorist-like characteristics. Their targets were no longer limited to underworld disputes. They indiscriminately turned toward any civilians and public authorities who dared to resist. To intimidate society, Nomura ordered his men to make car bombs and attack shop owners who refused to pay protection fees. He even openly ordered the assassination of lawmakers, prosecutors, police, and court officials, and community representatives who advocated cracking down on organized crime. To seize a share of infrastructure projects, they shot and killed the head of Kyushu Electric Power and bombed the residence of a senior executive at Seibu Gas. In 2000, Nomura even ordered his men, after a dispute over how election-related profits were divided, to throw 5 Molotov cocktails at the private residence of then Deputy Chief Cabinet Secretary Shinzo Abe. Nomura was like a local emperor, and the reasons he used violence were often absurd beyond belief. In 2003, a horrific bombing took place at a bar in Fukuoka Prefecture. Kudo-kai members threw 2 grenades into the establishment while it was open for business, leaving 12 innocent civilians seriously injured, with multiple people suffering permanent disabilities. And the real trigger for this attack was simply that the bar had responded to a government call by placing a sticker at the entrance that read, "No Yakuza allowed." This kind of brutal kill one to warn 100 tactic left the citizens of Kitakyushu terrified and silent at the time. And those who carried out the attacks were like brainwashed suicide soldiers. Some even chose to kill themselves when surrounded by police, cutting off the chain of evidence leading back to Nomura. This disregard for human life and this reckless use of heavy weaponry made Kudo-kai the only Yakuza group in Japan officially designated as a particularly dangerous organized crime group. But even that was only the tip of the iceberg of Nomura's brutal methods. Time goes back to 1998. At that time, the port in Kitakyushu was in a golden period of large-scale development. But this fat piece of meat, worth tens of billions of yen, was tightly controlled by the local fisheries cooperative. In order to force his way into the port construction business and demand enormous kickbacks, Nomura repeatedly pressured the cooperative, but he was firmly rejected by its chairman, Kunihiro Kajiwara. Seeing that the other side dared to block his source of money, Nomura developed an intent to kill. On the morning of February 18, 1998, on the streets of Kokurakita Ward in Kitakyushu City, the 70-year-old Kunihiro Kajiwara was ambushed in broad daylight in front of many witnesses. An assassin from Kudo-kai fired several shots at close range, and this stubborn old man was killed on the spot. The chairman's violent death threw the entire fisheries cooperative into terror. From that point on, no one dared to resist Nomura again. And ironically, because of the Yakuza's internal code of silence at the time, along with a lack of direct evidence, this bloody case could not be secured as a conviction for as long as 16 years. Do you remember the doctor mentioned earlier, the one who was stabbed because the surgery was unsatisfactory? It was not until 2014, when police launched a top-down operation and investigated the cases together, that they realized. The dentist was the grandson of Kajiwara, the fisheries cooperative chairman who had been shot and killed by Nomura back then. 2 generations of the same family, across more than 20 years, were brutally targeted one after another by the very same Yakuza organization. The fisheries cooperative chairman's case became the fuse that led police to completely uproot Kudo-kai. However, police involvement thoroughly enraged Nomura. To retaliate against public authority and intimidate investigators, Nomura issued even more reckless orders. In April 2012, a retired police officer who had long been responsible for cracking down on Kudo-kai was walking down a street when he was shot at close range by Kudo-kai members. He was seriously wounded, hit in the waist and legs, and that was not enough. Over the following years, Nomura even continued to instruct his men to attack the families of police officers. But for a long time, Nomura was still able to remain at large. On the one hand, he had an extremely complex network of in-law connections. He was the brother-in-law of Seiji Matsuyama, a senior LDP lawmaker at the time who had served as a cabinet minister. The 2 men had married a pair of biological sisters. It is hard not to associate this kind of relationship with collusion between politics, business, and organized crime. On the other hand, Nomura knew exactly how to evade conviction. He never carried out attacks personally. All wrongdoing was executed by the suicide soldiers beneath him, while he stayed hidden behind the scenes, keeping his own hands free of blood. This made it difficult for police, for more than a decade afterward, to secure a legal conviction against him. However, the times changed. As the 2020 Tokyo Olympics approached, in order to reshape the image of public safety, the Japanese government launched a major crackdown codenamed Top Operation. At the same time, Nomura's power had already begun to threaten a wider range of interests. Because U.S. military bases in Japan are densely concentrated in Kyushu, Kudo-kai's violent activities even drew the attention of the United States. The U.S. government directly announced the freezing of all of Nomura's overseas accounts, imposing comprehensive economic sanctions on him. On September 11, 2014, as part of this series of actions, Japanese police deployed an unprecedented force of 3,800 elite officers, sealing off Nomura's fortress-like mansion so tightly that nothing could get in or out. Faced with this kind of show of force, Nomura initially showed no fear. Perhaps he still believed the network behind him would protect him, as it always had. That day, as he was dressed in clean athletic wear and about to step outside, officers who had already been lying in wait rushed in and arrested him on the spot. This time, no reinforcements came. During years of detention, Nomura was interrogated more than 60 times, but he denied every accusation and remained extremely arrogant. Until August 24, 2021, when the Fukuoka District Court delivered a historic verdict. When the judge announced that Nomura, for ordering 4 attacks, was guilty of murder and of organizing attempted murder and sentenced him to death, the former Yakuza emperor completely lost control in court. He stared fixedly at the judge and delivered the threat that shocked all of Japan. "You will regret this for the rest of your life." However, the legal battle did not end with the death sentence. Nomura and his defense team immediately filed an appeal, arguing that there was no direct evidence, such as recordings or written orders, proving that Nomura personally gave the command to kill the fisheries cooperative chairman. On March 12, 2024, the Fukuoka High Court issued its second instance ruling in this case that had shocked all of Japan. Unexpectedly, the judges announced that they would overturn the death sentence from the first trial and instead sentence Nomura to life imprisonment. The core logic behind the reduced sentence lay in the rigor of the law. Although the court found that within an organization as strictly hierarchical as Kudo-kai, Nomura held absolute command authority over the 3 cases: the stabbing of the nurse, the attack on the dentist, and the shooting of the police officer. When it came to the most serious case, the fisheries cooperative chairman case, the court held that while the prosecution's inference was reasonable, the evidentiary chain still contained reasonable doubt, because there was no conclusive proof that Nomura directly took part in plotting the murder order, and under the Japanese judicial principle that doubts must benefit the defendant, the court ultimately overturned the death sentence. This outcome once again triggered a nationwide earthquake of public opinion. The victims' families expressed extreme anger and disappointment. In their view, this kind of Yakuza godfather, operating from the shadows, is precisely the most insidious way organized crime evades legal punishment. Today, Nomura, now 80 years old, remains behind bars. Although he managed to pull his life back from the edge of the execution platform, what awaits him is not a peaceful old age, but the dull, compulsory labor of prison life. This once extravagant Yakuza boss now has to take off his custom-made suit and put on a prison uniform with a number. The hands that once signed off on life and death decisions now wear cheap work gloves. And inside a tightly controlled prison block, he is no longer the feared, living king of hell, just an elderly inmate who wakes up on schedule, lines up for roll call, and spends his days folding envelopes and gluing paper boxes for a meager daily labor allowance.